D&D players of Reddit, what is the best plot twist you have seen? Not the player but the DM. I am proud of this plot I created in my homebrew campaign. Basically the main plot was to destroy this magical clock tower in the middle of Neverwinter that opens time rifts to other dimensions or times in Faerun. When the party got to the clock tower and slayed a powerful bladeswoman who guarded it, they ran into duplicates of themselves from a different time controlling the tower. The duplicates were of different alignments, different weaponry, even more powerful the PCs themselves. They would have to slay their duplicates in order to go further. Everyone lost their shit at this, but more like the excited bro WTF kinda deal. So, here's the short version. The DM had decided that we could finally play an evil party, and he had given us permission to use all sorts of books other than the core rules. This was way back in the days of 3.0 D&D, so we had all sorts of fun. The group was a pretty big one, and the characters I remember were me, a Teneruak barbarian, setting specific demon or crossbreed. The cleric, a human cultist of an extremely esoteric not god, banished to the spaces between the planes by the gods. The wizard, a gnome who rolled around in what was essentially a giant flying teapot. The rogue, a halfling murder machine. The cleric fighter, a elf demon thing from some kind of giant family of demon elves engaged in constant treachery and general dickery. The samurai, a human who was largely unimportant in all possible ways. I don't really remember how the game started, but whatever the plot was going to be, it quickly got dropped when the characters swore sacred oaths to each other that we would work together, conquer the world, and split it between us to rule with our diverse array of iron fists. In my case, it was a literal iron fist after I took advantage of fire resistance to have a spiked gauntlet forged in place around one hand. To this end, our characters took up adventuring, with a specific focus on dungeon crawling, with the express intent of honing our skills and gaining wealth and powerful magic. The DM was cool with it, and we did lots of old school adventuring. It first started going off the rails when my character started taking advantage of the random encounter table to directly gain power. Anytime we encountered orcs, I would, in Orcish, demand to know who the leader was. With a really good intimidate skill, I would reliably get an answer, and immediately call him a weak coward and challenge him for leadership. This would end with a dead orc leader, and a group of orcs who accepted me as the boss. In short, I was role-playing leadership, and using role-playing as a way to get around the limits of it. We began amassing some real money and power, and eventually, we embarked on step 1 of the plan for world conquest. The DM really didn't think we could do it, but he refused to just say no, which was probably a mistake, since step 1 was to break out the Stronghold Builder's Guidebook, and build a burrowing fortress. Step 2 was sacking Baldur's Gate and putting it to the torch. The invasion was perfect. A fortress erupting from the ground and loosing an orcish horde into the heart of the city brought us the chaos and calamity needed for our party to find and destroy pre-scouted targets. Local adventurers, organizational centers, and anyone capable of rallying defenders met with a half-dozen hardened PCs. By this point, the rogue was permanently invisible and telepathic, rendering him the perfect assassin. The gnome wizard had constructed a floating iron sphere, with a conical arrow slit that made it resemble a teapot, albeit one that poured boiling electrified acid instead of tea. The reason he had it was because he spent levels 1 to 10 getting pimp slapped a lot, and the teapot made him largely immune to mundane attacks by the simple method of nanny nanny boo boo. You can't see me. The clerical cultist was fully committed to spreading the madness and destruction demanded by his not god, and did so with a seemingly endless torrent of spells that rent minds and caused flesh, bone, metal and rock to simply stop existing. We found out later that it was just ray-skinned standard spells, but it was still cool. The cleric fighter had so many defensive spells in place that he was essentially untouchable by anything other than a major disjunction. The samurai was comparatively boring, content with just chopping people up with an impressive display of speed and precision. My Teneruak barbarian possessed surgically implanted trollish organs, and being fireproof already, was largely an unstoppable engine of carnage and hate. The city was looted and burned within 2 hours. Slaves were taken, and the rest killed and eaten on the spot. With that, the fortress sank beneath the earth and we began making our way to the next target on the other end of the continent. We waged a terror war for months. No target was near the previous one as we used random, untraceable movement to make massing against us extremely difficult, and we made numerous trips into Orc territory or to Skullport to renew my army's numbers. It all ended when we finally hit the last remaining major city, Waterdeep. By this point, we were epic level. Essentially nothing was beyond our abilities. Unfortunately, the Forgotten Realms are simply lousy with epic level NPCs, and they finally managed to gang up on us. Powerful earth-moving magic forced us to surface outside of the city, and we finally faced a foe on ground they chose. The cult cleric told us that if we could buy him an hour, he could kill them all. We asked him exactly how many, and he explained. He could kill all of them. No magic defenses, no armor, no lucky saves. He had epic level spells granted by a not god of unmaking and madness, so we didn't doubt him, and we went out to buy him an hour. He went to the top of the tower to work. It was untouchable from the outside, but gave him a view of the battlefield, so he liked to perform rituals up there. The battle was a slaughter on both sides. I had something like upper 4 digits worth of orc warriors at this point, and we spent them. By God, we spent them. Do you know what a battlefield looks like when something like 10 or 15 epic level characters, most of them spellcasters, are cutting loose? The high point for me was passing save after save to get through to Ilminster before activating a 1-use anti-magic field and tearing his spine out with my hands. No contingency spells for you, yeah jackass. Of course, it didn't last. We fell, one by one, and as the cleric scrambled to finish his ritual, the forces of Goody Goody Two Shoes surged up the tower. He finished just as they reached him. He looked at the DM, said in character, "Gentlemen, meet my god," and casually informed the DM that the universe no longer existed. This required some sort of explanation. The DM knew what he had been casting, and it didn't destroy universes. The spell was one that summoned a god's avatar for a very, very short amount of time. Like, 1d4 rounds short. The player handed the sourcebook where he found his not god to the DM, and pointed out a small paragraph buried in the fluff text. So great was the not god's unnatural and blasphemous being that if it ever escaped the prison built for it outside of reality by the gods, the universe would cease to be, replaced instead by the perfection of eternal and endless nothing. We kinda sat in silence for a moment at that while the player looked a little smug that a plan spanning 25 levels had finally been achieved, before vigorously high-fiving him while the DM continued looking stunned. TLDR. Epic Evil Party rips through the most popular and Mary Sue-filled setting like Danes through 9th century England, and the universe is instantly snuffed out with a snappy line. Was playing a Mary Sue apocalypse and we threw a coin into a wishing well to end the entire thing and accidentally summoned enough dragons to start an entire new campaign. And it was because the dragon trainer of the group asked for any dragon he could possibly want. Yay, we all died. The cheerful bard NPC helping the party was the big bad evil guy all along. In the end, he brainwashed half of the country and formed a country of his own. The players couldn't defeat him at this point. We were running a campaign where we had to make a cauldron of sleeping draft. Ended up spilling the entire thing and knocking out almost everyone in the town. Fun. Was playing a superhero campaign. One time we were called to an alternate dimension in a traditional fantasy escape. Cat people, ogres, evil wizards etc. where one of the players came from. Turns out the evil wizard was trying to awaken a death god that my character had a connection to. I figured out what was coming one session before the fight, which let me prepare for what was gonna have to happen. The DM made the scenario such that the death god would awaken next to a major city while the evil wizard was on the other side of the continent. The choice was to let some NPCs sacrifice themselves to slow down the death god while the PCs went to fight the evil wizard. But that just didn't seem heroic to me. So I planned to sacrifice the character I'd been playing for 3 years, basically soloing this death god to buy time for the wizard to be killed. I lasted 8 rounds against that thing, through preparation and a lot of luck, and I only had a few rounds left before he'd have snuffed me. But the rest of the team absolutely annihilated the wizard. Went all out to save me. Best moment ever. I danced with a death god. And didn't die. I was playing a warlock who didn't really know what his patron was other than that it was powerful. We were attempting a prison break for a mysterious employer, but it went wrong and some of us were captured. As I was being tortured, I asked my patron for help, which resulted in my turning into a monster and killing everything in the prison, nearly killing one of my fellow PCs in the process. Meanwhile, the rest of the players rescued the prisoners and escaped. We later discovered that one of the prisoners was a serial killer who worshipped my Warlock's patron. After that, my patron also tended to take over whenever I got angry. It was fun. We touched a bowl in a dungeon and literally spawned the spirit form of Satan, who turned one of our party members into a chicken. When the helpful NPCs we had met started to get annoyed with our group. Since I was an elf, I sided with the NPCs from the Elf Kingdom, but rest of the party wanted to unleash some evil or something. Needless to say, I was only one who didn't need a new character for that campaign. DM got a bit drunk and one of our players hijacked the campaign, become the final boss, and ended up getting himself banished to another dimension. Not a player, but I dunno, I listened to this guy who ended up poisoning his entire party after the DM and other players were being super unfair and toxic for a couple of years, and since they were hardcore, they had to burn all of their character sheets when they died.